In American society, money is a taboo topic. We're taught at a young age it's improper to talk about it, but we're also bombarded with messages about the power and importance of money in our everyday lives. And by not talking about it, we miss out on the skills and lessons we need to effectively understand and financially plan. That changes today. Welcome to Money Tales. Hosted by Sandy Brager and Cami Doder, Money Tales brings more than 35 years of combined professional experience in personal finance to demystify money and demonstrate what it's like to speak openly about personal financial matters. Join us each episode as they interview modern-day movers and shakers about how money decisions intertwine with their daily lives in order to give you better insight into productive financial conversations. Subscribe today and register for our blog Fathom at aspiriant.com/podcasts to increase your money mojo. And now, here's Cami and Sandy.
Steven Atneosen joins us this week on Money Tales. Steven describes himself as a husband, a father, a citizen of Earth, and a lifelong optimist who is focused on leveraging technology and data to improve the quality of life. He's a passionate advocate for fairness and equity for all. Steven's commitment to justice and respect stems from his experiences being bullied as a child. This shaped his belief in the importance of treating others with kindness and integrity. These values have profoundly influenced Steven's career path, personal philosophy, and relationship with money. As you'll hear in this conversation, Steven has provocative ideas for how society can use its financial resources to make the world a better and more sustainable place for all of us. Let me tell you more about Steven. He's the CEO and co-founder of tomtA.ai, a data privacy and AI enablement solution that generates safe and precise data from PII without privacy risk. Steven's career spans over 20 years growing disruptive tech companies that leverage data and AI to improve health, mobility, and energy.
Here are 3 key money topics Steven hits on in this conversation. First, how money gives you the ability to do what you think is important. As Steven looks back on his life so far, he's noticed a clear change in his spending habits as his values have evolved. Second, how Steven sees his family's financial resources as giving them flexibility to decide where to be in the world. This is important to them as the climate crisis develops and geopolitical events continue to become more prevalent and threatening. And third, how his ethos is don't consume just to consume. If you're going to use resources, make sure it's for a good purpose. We hope you share this episode with a friend, and please subscribe to Money Tales on your favorite podcast platform. Now on to our conversation with Steven Atneosen.
Welcome to the Money Tales podcast. I'm Cami Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager.
Sandy, how was it to be in person for the Yahoo Finance interview recently when all the other ones have been on Zoom?
It was fun. I was on a Yahoo show back in February of 2020, right before the pandemic. That was the last time I did an in-studio broadcast interview. 4 years later, I got to go back on a different show, which is focused on wealth planning. And it was so much fun. But doing the broadcast interviews remotely in the interim was a very different experience when I record them from my home studio. We'll put studio in quotes there. I'm oftentimes talking into my iPad and I don't get to see who I'm talking to. I don't see myself. Being in studio is very different because I was being interviewed by the presenter right there in person and the cameras were there and I could see the teleprompter. I could see myself. It was like relearning a skill. It felt so foreign.
Isn't that funny? It was, I'm certain, very hard to learn how to do it on your iPad because you can't see the person. Can't see their expressions. Now you can, but it's different challenges.
Nothing's easy in life.
No. You covered some evergreen money conversations in that interview around marriage, starting with premarital agreements. I'm so glad you covered that. And I love that they were asking you questions because it's such important. And we've covered a lot here. I love that you emphasize it's an opportunity for couples to start having money conversations if they haven't done so already.
That's right. Especially at a time of life when they should be the most enthusiastic about their relationship because they're in love and about to get married. That is a perfect time to have money conversations, whether it's for the first time with your significant other, fiance, or whether you've been having them all along in your relationship and now you take them to the next level as you're getting ready to walk down the aisle. Just like any good, productive money conversation, having discussions about expectations and about responsibilities can be really helpful at the start of a marriage.
Let's see if our guest today has any thoughts on the matter. Welcome, Steven Atneosen, to the Money Tales podcast.
Well, thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Would you introduce yourself and share a couple pivotal moments that have taken place in your life that really influenced who you are today?
Steven Atneosen. I'm a husband, a father, citizen of the earth, lifelong optimist in how to leverage technology and data to improve the quality of life. That's been pretty much my professional career focus after being minted as a lawyer. That's the short version. Things that have defined who I am. I became a lawyer primarily because I believe in fairness and equity for all. And I think being bullied as a kid might have had an impact on why I chose that path, wanting people to behave themselves, to be respectful, to not cheat. And of course, that defines who I become and what I value.
Being bullied and leading to a career in law. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it does.
That's so interesting. Tell us a little bit more about your youth, Steven, and when, in particular, money started having meaning to you.
I think my parents, fabulous folks born in the Midwest, Minneapolis. My father was a hardworking electrician, but also entrepreneurial in nature, acquired rental properties, that sort of thing. And my mom being, I think, not just a stay-at-home mom, but being sort of a thought leader on quality of food and removing sugar. This is back in the 70s and 80s. So it's pretty early in American households anyway. Having this really strong work ethic at home, that was a big part of my relationship with money. So when we would earn money in odd jobs around the house, or I started having jobs cutting lawns or those typical things you do as a teenager, I would save my money. Studiously, I used to have a ledger and I would collect my money and save it for something perhaps that I wanted. And then by the time I'd save enough money for the thing I wanted, I wouldn't want it anymore. It was a really good lesson my parents taught me.
So your parents are instrumental in teaching you some strong foundational aspects of money. You're getting picked on by other kids at some point.
One kid in particular. So figured it out. Yes. It did not define who I am, I would say, but it made me particularly sensitive to people doing their jobs, watching out for others, being part of community. If you see wrong, you should speak out. We're all here together. It works as a community. It doesn't work if we're all siloed and just trying to take care of our own needs. I'm more, of course, evolved now than I was in my 20s. I think I was super ambitious and super aggressive when in my 20s, but the common thread was fairness, equity, be honorable, don't lie, don't cheat. And I say these things because it sounds obvious, but we live in an era where, again, not to get political, but half the country thinks that a person who cheats should be the president of the United States. And that should give everyone pause.
I really like the values that you're working into this conversation. And I'm curious, as you're a young person becoming aware of fairness and its importance to you, how and when did money figure into that conversation, Steven, and as you were building your view of the world?
Obviously, money defines in American culture status, who you are, where you come from, how you're treated, middle class upbringing. So I don't think it negatively affected me at all. My parents worked hard to ensure that we had opportunities going to college. We're very simple people. We don't need so much. And that frugality to money is power, but not power in a negative way. Money is opportunity. Being younger, wanting, oh, wouldn't it be great to be successful and have a life of a big house and a really cool car and blah, blah, blah. You know, the American dream, which is now I see it as No, money gives you the ability to do what you think is important. The irony is, I probably drive the cheapest car I've ever driven in my entire life because I just don't value things like that anymore. We put into money into things that we think are important. Education, climate literacy, equity and fairness for all. So money is an enabler in my eyes.
Steven, how did that change for you? Doesn't seem like you're very materialistic, but you had dreams to spend, to grow, to buy a house. But then it sounds like it's changed. When did that change happen? And describe how it happened.
I was a car guy growing up. So yes, I've had some expensive cars. So I definitely was materialistic in that sense because I valued the product, let's say the BMW or the Porsche or whatever. But I would always buy used, and I would always buy a car that I figured, whoa, I could sell it for more than I bought it. That changed, I think, in the 2000s, meaning my values. Do I want to be on this, I call it the gerbils on a wheel kind of thing? Americans trying to continue to consume and consume and consume. To what end? To, I like racing bicycles at a high level. So that became my focus. And I met my wife that way. We had an expensive bicycle, but I don't need an expensive house because it's not impactful or helpful to my life. And I don't need an expensive car. So I think I remember I needed a car to transport a bike to races. And I had a Porsche Cabriolet. That wouldn't work.
That doesn't work.
So I bought a second car, which is, again, idiotic to me now because why would you have two cars? But whatever. I bought a Prius back in the Gen 2 Prius, when they were very fashionable in LA, and I was living in LA at the time. And I started driving and thought, this is just lovely. It's quiet and it's lovely to drive and it gets 55 miles per gallon and it holds a bicycle and 5 passengers. And then I just stopped driving the Porsche. And since then, I've just left that world of being a car guy who was very defining for me because I had friends who went into the business. They were designers at BMW or whatever. And I more defined what was important to me. So using my professional life as a lawyer and technologist as let's change healthcare. Let's live a life that is more respectful to my neighbors and to the planet.
Steven, what was happening in your life in the early 2000s that caused that value shift?
My first startup in LA, not surprisingly, was called carparts.com. And it was an e-tailer for car parts, as you could imagine. And we pivoted to more of a supply chain software company because obviously e-tailing was not sustainable at that time. And 9/11 happened and the downturn in the economy, and we all had to get more careful with our resource use. And I got more conservative with money. I spent less. I was more careful with how I spent it. Everything in my life pretty much changed.
So it sounds like you were reacting to the macro environment.
I think that's correct. If you look at my career, I take risks. I came out of law school, became a corporate lawyer, which is a good gig, but then I quit that 2 years in to work on a U.S. Supreme Court appeal. That's a lightning strike. Wow, what an opportunity. Fourth Amendment search and seizure. So I did that, and I was a DA, prosecuting lawyer, for a year. So that was, I felt, wow, what an opportunity to give back to the community. So I did that. Then I went into a big firm. Then I supported entrepreneurs in that big firm. I'm following my passion of being entrepreneurial and solving problems. But that was more valuable to me. So the ability to do and work in what I wanted to work on was more important than financial security. So had I bought a house, living in Minneapolis, being a corporate lawyer, let's say, oh, I can't take that job to work on a U.S. Supreme Court appeal. It pays me a third of what my corporate job paid me.
And you did it.
I did it. Well, of course. And by the way, if you talk to anyone, of course you would. Why wouldn't you do that? What a lifetime opportunity. But a lot of people wouldn't have. They say, well, I have a house payment. So they don't do those things. And every day they give up. I don't want to be too harsh on people in general, but you live this life of, it's all about money. It's all about accumulating things.
There's trade-offs.
Absolutely. I think that you can still be passionate and good about what you want to accomplish and contribute in the world. And no one needs a giant house and a giant SUV. Like, no one needs that. They get around with big families in other parts of the world. So, but Americans, we're just consumers. We consume at a massive level. And so that becomes the system in which you live. I guess I didn't want to participate in that.
You intentionally chose not to.
Absolutely.
So I want to know, you're meeting your wife, you're racing bikes. Where does she fall into these money conversations?
Well, she's Swedish, so she's pretty conservative as well in money. And she's very aligned in she wants to be impactful and helpful in what she does. She's a very low maintenance person, which is a good fit for me. I've had partners who love to wear shoes and handbags, and that's great. And I think that's awesome if that's what you want to do or live large. But I don't necessarily like to live large. She fit that very well.
Steven, we opened with Sandy's interview on Yahoo Finance, where she was talking about having money conversations before marriage. And I'm curious, it sounds like you both align, but did you actually have conversations specifically about money and how money would be handled in your home together before you got married?
My short answer is no, deliberately, because I'm all in romantically. So I love her. And so it doesn't matter. And what you folks would say, and rightfully so, yes, I get that you're all in, but hey, we're objective advisors. So, hey, maybe just consider not being blinded by this all in concept. But I was. And so I assumed that she'd be fair. She's a fair person. Of course, there are instances where we find our partners, our business friends aren't fair. This is a common occurrence, but perhaps I just got lucky so far.
Sounds like you have something very special.
Steven, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier as your relationship with money and your life has matured, that you see money more as opportunity. Tell us how that fits into your life today.
It affords us options. For example, my son is dyslexic. He's 9. And so it afforded us the ability to move to Redwood City, where his school is. And we think it's probably the best school in probably the country, certainly in Northern California, for kids that have his particular learning challenges. And of course, we would make that a priority because he's our son and we want to give him an opportunity to deal with this learning challenge. Number 2, I'm a founder of a startup. It's an early stage startup. We're not killing it for sales because it's a generative AI plus differential privacy based on computational dynamics. So it's a deep tech product that takes time to bring to market, to solve important problems, to liberate data for life sciences, healthcare, fintech. So it gives me the ability to do that without needing an income to support a mortgage payment, to support a lifestyle that I think would be unsustainable. And thirdly, as a family, we're here now, but given the challenges that we'll face through climate change as a global community, there are places that are harder to live than others. As I introduced myself, I'm a optimist by nature, but I'm a realist. I'm not sure where we'll be as a family. We might be in Sweden because we want to live where we are least affected by climate change. And climate change will affect not just your physical environment, but remember, we're faced with geopolitical turmoil. We have more global conflicts than ever in our history, probably of our lifetime in the past 40, 45 years. So that's a challenge. So again, I don't want to go too far down this road, but we feel like we need to be nimble financially so we can live where it's helpful for us as a family and we can be in it with a community that's of like-minded. Because I think you want to be in 10 years somewhere where we're all addressing the same problems. Social equity, making sure everyone has healthcare, making sure everyone has ability to go to good schools, everyone has housing. And as a Californian, I'm really conflicted because we generate such interesting innovation here in this state, but yet we literally live in a third world. We have mass transit that's really not remotely as good as it should be. We have an energy grid that kills people in 2017, 2018. Money gives us the options of saying, well, where do we want to be in the world?
I like what you're saying about being nimble. It's so interesting to hear the different threads of this conversation come together, because it sounds like you and your wife have accumulated resources and that you're extremely thoughtful about how you're allocating those resources. It's not a save, 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 or spend, spend, spend. It's where are we making investments that make the most sense for the lives of our family and our community. That's a thrilling place to be, Steven. I wonder, how often do you think about money?
Frequently, I manage our money. It's hard enough to earn money the first time. So we want to make sure we don't lose it, but we also want to maximize it. We want to put it where it will grow. I'm thinking about it more and more now. It's important to preserve and grow it.
Steven, you're very purpose driven in all the things you do. And I'm curious how you've seen that evolve and be cultivated in your life, your purpose, your values. How do you think about handing off some of that to your son?
Well, he is the product of us, definitely. So if you were to meet Magnus, he definitely has an opinion about behavior that he sees. So he's had the benefit of traveling. We spent a lot of time in Sweden, and he's been in Norway. When you're living and working and in that community, you see a different kind of system, a society that values people walking and biking over cars. So it's delightful. It's a lovely place to be. And we live in a place that is not that. We live in a place that's very suburban and dominated by trucks and SUVs. So we're a biking family. He's very aware of culturally the behavior of Americans. And so that's one. Two, I think personal responsibility. We want to instill in him that we're honest and honorable people. And so it doesn't matter what happens, tell the truth. If you've made a mistake or whatever, admit it, apologize if you must, and try to fix it. That's important to us for Magnus. He just understands we don't want to consume for just the sake of consumption. We're hoping that we instill that in him, that if you're going to use resources, make sure it's for a good purpose.
Steven, if we brought in this conversation to the world, if you could make one or two big changes, and I'm asking you this because you're obviously a very big thinker and very entrepreneurial and used to solving problems, what are one or two ideas that you would have to really change how our community utilizes the resource of money to create opportunities for everybody?
So money is an excellent lever. If you're a clever innovator, you generally look at what's working somewhere else, not trying to invent it completely on your own in a vacuum. So when you look at the Nordics, we're super innovative as Americans in California, which I'm very proud of. Well, we don't have many guardrails. We don't have a carbon tax. Fuel is cheap. Resources are cheap. Now, I think we all agree that that's not going to last forever. We're going to start seeing challenges to the way we live. So money is a great instrument to say, listen, let's tax what is bad for us and incentivize what is good for us. So if you're a Norwegian citizen and you want to buy a car, there's a cost to that, especially if it burns gasoline or diesel. But if you want to buy an EV, it's very little cost. And if you want to take mass transit, which is plentiful, it's quite frankly almost free. And that's good for the community because people would rather walk to school or walk to work or bike to work than drive a car, except for Americans. We're very emotionally attached to our vehicles. And as a car guy, I completely understand it.
Sounds like you're a former car guy, though, Steven.
It's evolved.
I'm absolutely a former car guy. I still really respect the product creation. I really admire people who create them. My criticism is on how they're used. So I think money is the appropriate lever Because when things have costs, people will be more careful. I think that is a better policy for us. We'll build communities that are more sustainable and more enjoyable. Think about healthcare too. Because we spend so much time in our cars, our trucks and SUVs, we're unhealthy because they're not walking. You see people drive around and oh, there's a spot right next to the store. You're like, well, just park a block away, man. Just walk it. But no one wants to do that. So effectively, we have a very unhealthy population because of the way we live. So I think it's all circular. It's not one issue. It's many.
Interrelated.
Absolutely. I think people should pay for what they cause society. That's the best way to say it. If I'm going to create emissions, those emissions have an impact on my community. So I should just pay the tax on that. That's fair. If I'm going to drive a really giant truck, it's going to pound the roads and we have to replace them more frequently. So I should pay a tax on that. And if you go in other countries, they do have a weight of vehicle, what it runs on. That's what they do. I have a question for you guys. Why do you think Americans feel like we shouldn't pay for those things? Because you know it's true. Americans don't like to pay for anything.
It's a really good question. I think it has a lot to do with our cultural values and how we've been raised in the American dream that you mentioned before. We're sort of taught through society to consume, and we don't really think about communities differently. There's, I think, generally a scarcity mindset that's embedded in this country. And we hear that all the time on Money Tales. It'd be nice to be able to globally remove that, because there's so much opportunity for people to get beyond that and utilize money as a resource, as an opportunity, as you've been describing.
And Steven, you're also talking about learning from others, which is really important, learning from what they're doing in Scandinavia. I believe that for us, it's really hard for change. We haven't been taxed on that before. Why should we today? What's changed? And that change, that mindset, and having the exposure of where things work better. I don't think any place has figured it all out, but learning from, oh, wow, this is an interesting concept that evens out, that takes care of our community in a way. What an interesting idea, even though we haven't necessarily been paying for it previously.
I mean, think about this. I think the homelessness number in California, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was shocked. It's 140,000. It's insane.
It's too high.
When I lived in San Francisco, I think the budget for homelessness was about $1 billion a year.
It was a lot. It still is a lot.
Yeah. So I think it's over $1 billion now. So you're thinking $1 billion is a lot of money. So homelessness requires a home. $1 billion seems like plenty of money to build homes. And so when you look at how societies deal with this problem, having worked in healthcare and being healthcare insecure, guess what? If you're homeless or food insecure, you're healthcare insecure, of course. This perpetual wheel of throwing money into a pit of trying to solve these three different problems when home insecurity is number one. Solve that, then food insecurity is less likely or probably not likely. I just feel like as Americans, especially as Californians, we're supposed to be innovative. Why haven't we solved this yet? It's not a hard problem. We're good problem solvers. Why can't we figure this out?
Tell us, Steven, this has been so great and thought-provoking speaking with you today. What's your next money conversation going to be, and who's it going to be with?
Well, perhaps you two on this problem I posed, because I'm very curious about your opinions. I feel more comfortable asking questions than answering them. Perhaps it'll be that.
Thanks for saying it that way, Steven. I think the more curious we all are and we're asking each other more questions, the more we learn and grow. So thanks for putting it that way. Would you share with our listeners, where is the best place for them to find you digitally?
Probably LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Steven, it has been such a treat to have a very thoughtful, deep conversation with you around money on Money Tales.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening. And leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Aspiriant. Go to aspiriant.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcasts@aspiriant.com. See you next time.